The breaking point. Station Kepler 9 floated in the darkness between stars, a massive wheel of metal and light that served as the galaxy's greatest trading hub. For 200 years, it had been the beating heart of interstellar commerce, where 100 species came to buy, sell, and negotiate. The station's outer ring glowed with the signs of 1,000 businesses, their alien scripts promising everything from rare minerals to exotic foods. Captain Elena Vasquez walked through the lower decks where humans worked. She was 42 years old with dark hair tied back in a practical bun and hands that bore the scars of 20 years in space. Around her, human workers moved cargo, repaired systems, and kept the station running. They were the backbone of Kepler 9, though few of the alien species who profited from their labor would admit it. Elena stopped at a viewport and looked out at the mining platforms in the distance. 17 human crews were out there right now, extracting rare elements from the asteroid field. They worked 12-hour shifts in conditions that would kill most species, but humans were cheap labor. They were reliable, adaptable, and most importantly, they never complained. That was what 2 centuries of being the newcomers in a crowded galaxy had taught humanity. Smile, work hard, and maybe someday the older species would see humans as equals. The communication panel on her wrist buzzed. It was Jackson Reed, her second-in-command on Mining Platform 7. His face appeared on the small screen, and Elena immediately knew something was wrong. Jackson was normally calm, but now his eyes were wide with fear. "Captain, we have a situation," he said, his voice tight. "The Vraksh inspectors just arrived. They're saying our quota is short." Elena felt her stomach drop. The Vraksh conglomerate owned the mining rights to this sector. They were massive creatures, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 powerful arms. They had built their fortune by controlling resource extraction across dozens of systems, and they were known for their ruthless business practices. "How short?" Elena asked. "We're not short at all," Jackson replied. "We exceeded quota by 8%. But they're claiming the measurements are wrong. They're demanding we work an extra month without pay to make up the difference." This was not new. The Vraksh had been finding excuses to withhold payment for months. Human workers had no legal recourse. The Galactic Commerce Authority always sided with established species over newcomers. Humans had learned to accept these injustices as the price of doing business in space. "Tell them I'm coming," Elena said. "Don't agree to anything." She took a shuttle across to Platform 7. The flight took 20 minutes, and with every passing second, Elena felt a growing sense of dread. She had dealt with the Vraksh before. They respected only strength, and humans had spent 2 centuries proving they had none. The platform was a smaller version of the station, a collection of modules surrounding a central processing facility. Elena docked and made her way to the main cargo bay where her crew had gathered. 37 men and women, all wearing their work suits, all looking exhausted from their shift. They had families back on Earth and colonies, children they were working to feed, dreams they hoped to fulfill. They trusted Elena to protect them. The Vraksh inspectors stood in the center of the bay. There were 5 of them, led by an executive named the Rex. He was even larger than most of his species, with decorative metal bands around his 4 arms that indicated his rank. He looked at Elena with the same expression humans might reserve for an annoying insect. "Captain Vasquez," he said in the common trade language. "Your crew has failed to meet their obligations." "Our logs show we exceeded quota," Elena replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'd like to review your measurements." The Rex made a sound that might have been laughter. "Human logs are unreliable. We have determined the true output. Your crew will work an additional 30 standard days, or we will file a breach of contract complaint with the Commerce Authority." Elena knew what that meant. A breach complaint would blacklist every human worker on the platform. They would never get contracts again. Their families would suffer. This was extortion, pure and simple, but there was nothing she could do about it. "Give us 24 hours, she said. "Let me consult with Earth Command. We can negotiate something fair." "There is nothing to negotiate," the Rex said. He turned to his fellow inspectors. "Since the humans refuse to accept responsibility, we will confiscate their personal possessions as partial compensation. Strip the quarters." This was too far. Even by the cruel standards of the Vraksh, this was excessive. Elena stepped forward, her hands raised in what she hoped was a calming gesture. "That's not necessary," she said. "We'll agree to your terms. Just give us time to—" One of the Vraksh inspectors shoved her aside. Elena stumbled and fell, her shoulder hitting the metal deck hard. The crew started forward, angry shouts filling the bay. The Vraksh saw this as a threat. Or perhaps they had been planning this all along. Later investigations would never determine which. What happened next took less than 3 minutes. The Vraksh drew weapons that should never have been brought to a civilian platform. They fired into the crowd of human workers without warning, without mercy, without hesitation. The weapons made a sound like thunder in the enclosed space. Bodies fell. Blood spread across the deck. People screamed and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Elena struggled to her feet and ran toward her crew, trying to reach them, trying to help. She saw Jackson go down, his chest torn open. She saw Maria Santos, a young engineer who had just gotten engaged, collapse against a wall. She saw Thomas Wright, a grandfather who told stories about his grandchildren every single day, fall and not move again. Elena was hit in the leg. The pain was distant, unreal. She crawled toward her people, leaving a trail of blood behind her. Around her, the Vraiks continued firing until the screaming stopped. 37 people had been in that bay. When the Vraiks finally lowered their weapons, only 4 were still breathing. Elena was one of them. Thorex looked at the carnage with no expression at all. He spoke into his communicator in his own language, and then addressed the survivors in common. "This was an unfortunate accident," he said. "The humans attacked us. We defended ourselves. The Commerce Authority will be informed that this crew violated their contract and became violent. There will be no compensation to their families." He turned and walked away. The other Vraiks followed. They left Elena and 3 other survivors bleeding on the deck, surrounded by their dead friends and colleagues. They sealed the platform and departed, leaving the humans to either die or somehow call for help. Elena managed to reach a communication panel. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the controls. She sent a distress signal, and then she sent a message directly to Earth Command. She used her command codes, the ones reserved for absolute emergencies. She recorded everything that had happened, every detail she could remember, knowing she might not survive long enough to tell the story in person. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez," she said into the recorder, her voice weak. "Mining Platform 7. The Vraiks conglomerate just murdered my entire crew. 33 dead. They're going to call it self-defense. They're going to cover this up. Someone needs to know the truth. Someone needs to." She passed out before she could finish. Rescue ships from Station Kepler 9 arrived 6 hours later. They found the survivors and rushed them to medical facilities. They found the bodies and began processing the scene. And they found Elena's recording, which had been automatically transmitted to Earth the moment she finished speaking. The Vraiks conglomerate immediately released a statement. They claimed the human workers had attacked their inspectors without provocation. They provided doctored security footage that seemed to support their story. They expressed regret for the loss of life but insisted they had acted in self-defense. The Galactic Commerce Authority opened an investigation, but everyone knew how it would end. The Vraiks were too powerful, too important to the galactic economy. Humans were expendable. The news reached Earth 12 hours after the massacre. Every human colony, every station, every ship in space received the same information. They saw the bodies. They read Elena's testimony. They watched the Vraiks lie about what had happened. And they watched as the galaxy prepared to do nothing about it. For 48 hours, Earth was silent. No official statement came from the United Earth government. No ambassador appeared before the Galactic Council. The silence was so complete, so total, that it began to frighten other species. They had grown used to humans being predictable. They always protested politely. They always accepted whatever scraps of justice the galaxy offered. They never made trouble. This silence was different. This silence felt like something massive taking a breath before striking. On the 3rd day, every human in alien space received the same message. It came directly from Earth Command, encrypted with codes that meant it could not be questioned or disobeyed. The message was simple: come home. Now. Within hours, human workers across the galaxy began packing. They left their jobs at spaceports and trading stations. They abandoned positions in alien corporations and government facilities. They boarded ships heading back to human territory and did not explain why. When aliens asked what was happening, humans simply said they had been recalled. Nothing more. Station Kepler 9 ground to a halt within a week. 30% of the workforce was human. Without them, cargo piled up, systems failed, and chaos spread through the lower decks. The station administrator tried to contact Earth Command, tried to negotiate, tried to understand what was happening. Every message went unanswered. The Galactic Commerce Authority held an emergency session. They had completed their investigation of the Platform 7 incident with predictable results. The Vraiks were found to have acted appropriately given the circumstances. The human workers were blamed for the violence. No charges would be filed. No compensation would be paid. They expected protests. They expected humans to appear before them and plead for justice as they always did. Instead, they received a single message from Earth. It contained no words, just coordinates. 372 locations across the galaxy, each one a site where humans had died in workplace accidents that were never properly investigated, where human workers had been cheated of their wages, where human citizens had been murdered and their killers had faced no consequences. The message included detailed evidence for every single incident. Recordings that showed what really happened. Financial records that proved the theft. Medical reports that contradicted official stories. For 200 years, while humanity smiled and accepted injustice, they had been documenting everything. Every crime, every betrayal, every moment when the galaxy had proven that human lives did not matter. The final line of the message was simple: we remember. We have always remembered. And we are done pretending to forget. Elena Vasquez woke in a hospital on Earth. She had been unconscious for 4 days while surgeons repaired the damage to her leg and treated her other injuries. When she opened her eyes, she found herself in a private room with a view of mountains through the window. A man sat in a chair beside her bed. He wore a military uniform she had never seen before, black with silver insignia that looked like a shield. "Captain Vasquez," he said. "My name is Admiral Marcus Chen. I need to tell you what happens next." The Awakening. Admiral Marcus Chen was 60 years old with silver hair cut military short and eyes that had seen things Elena could only imagine. He sat beside her hospital bed with the patience of someone who had waited a very long time for this moment. Outside the window, the Rocky Mountains stretched toward a perfect blue sky. Elena had not seen Earth in 3 years. She had forgotten how beautiful home could be. "The other survivors?" Elena asked, her throat dry. "They're alive," Chen said. "They're being cared for. You were the most severely injured." He poured water into a glass and handed it to her. "I'm sorry for what happened to your crew. I'm sorry it took this long for Earth to act." Elena drank the water slowly. Her leg ached despite the pain medication. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the cargo bay and the bodies of her friends. The Vraksh are claiming self-defense. The Commerce Authority believes them. Nothing is going to change. "Everything is going to change," Chen said quietly. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. For 2 centuries, you and millions of humans like you have been the face of humanity in the galaxy. You've worked hard, stayed polite, and accepted injustice because you believed it was necessary for our survival. You were right to believe that. But you were never the only part of humanity's strategy." He stood and walked to the window. "While you were mining asteroids and building stations, while our diplomats were signing treaties that favored everyone except us, another branch of humanity was preparing for the day when politeness would no longer be enough. That day has arrived." Elena struggled to sit up. "What are you talking about?" Chen turned to face her. "Project Sentinel. It began 150 years ago, shortly after the Zephyra incident. Do you know that story?" "A human colony was destroyed," Elena said. "Pirates, I think." "Not pirates. The Korathi Trade Consortium. They wanted the system and humans were in the way, so they sterilized the planet from orbit. 50,000 colonists died in one afternoon. The Galactic Council expressed deep regret and did nothing else. That was when a group of Earth's leaders realized the truth. The galaxy would never protect us. If humanity wanted to survive, we needed to be able to protect ourselves." He activated a holographic display from his wrist device. Images appeared in the air between them. Warships, thousands of them, their hulls painted the same black as Chen's uniform. "Project Sentinel built these. We created them in secret facilities hidden in asteroid fields and the outer solar system. We developed weapons technology that the galaxy has never seen. We trained soldiers who have spent their entire lives preparing for a war we hoped would never come." Elena stared at the images. The ships were enormous, larger than anything she had seen in civilian space. They bristled with weapon systems and moved with a grace that suggested incredible power. "How did you keep this secret?" "By making sure everyone underestimated us," Chen said. "We encouraged the galaxy to see humans as workers and servants. We never showed our strength because strength invites challenges. But we were always watching. Every incident like Platform 7, every human murdered or exploited, we documented it all. We waited for the moment when we could no longer wait." "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we show the galaxy what we've been hiding." Chen closed the holographic display. "The Vraksh conglomerate is about to learn that human lives are not disposable. And every species that has profited from our suffering is about to realize they made a terrible mistake." 3 days later, the Vraksh home system received visitors. The Shadow Fleet, as Project Sentinel's forces were called, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 200 warships surrounded the industrial world of Vraksh Prime, their weapons powered but not yet firing. The planetary defense forces scrambled to respond, but they were designed to fight pirates and small raiders. They had never encountered anything like this. Admiral Chen commanded the fleet from the bridge of the UES Retribution. The ship's name had been chosen carefully. This was not a mission of conquest or revenge. This was justice delayed but no longer denied. He opened a communication channel that broadcast to every receiver on Vraksh Prime and to the wider galaxy beyond. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the United Earth Shadow Fleet," he said. "For 200 years, humanity has worked alongside you, built your stations, mined your resources, and asked only for fair treatment in return. You have murdered our people and called it acceptable losses. You have stolen our wages and called it business. You have covered up your crimes and assumed we would never respond. You were wrong." The Vraksh military command tried to interrupt the transmission. They demanded to know what gave Earth the right to threaten them. They insisted this was an act of war that would be answered with overwhelming force. Chen let them speak, then continued as if they had said nothing at all. Platform 7. 33 human workers murdered by Vraksh corporate security. The Galactic Commerce Authority ruled it justified self-defense based on fabricated evidence. "We have the real security footage. We have testimony from survivors. We have communications between Vraksh executives planning to eliminate troublesome human workers. All of this evidence is being transmitted to every major news network in the galaxy as I speak." Across Vraksh Prime, screens lit up with footage that could not be denied or explained away. The galaxy watched as Vraksh inspectors opened fire on unarmed humans. They heard the Rex discussing how to cover up the massacre. They saw the bodies and the survivors bleeding on the deck. The truth that the Commerce Authority had tried to bury was now impossible to ignore. "The individuals responsible for Platform 7 will be surrendered to Earth custody within 24 hours, Chen continued. The Rex and his 4 accomplices, along with every Vraksh executive who authorized or covered up the massacre. Additionally, the Vraksh conglomerate will pay full compensation to the families of every victim. Not the token amount you consider appropriate. Full compensation as determined by human courts." The Vraksh Supreme Chancellor appeared on the communication channel. He was ancient even by Vraksh standards, his gray skin wrinkled and his movement slow. But his voice carried the authority of someone who had ruled for decades. "You dare threaten us? You dare bring your fleet to our homeworld? We have allies. We have treaties. The galaxy will not allow this aggression to stand." "Then let them try to stop us," Chen said. "But before they do, they should consider what we are demonstrating here today. Every military installation in this system is currently targeted by our weapons. We know the location of every defense platform, every command center, every shipyard. We could destroy all of it in the next 10 minutes. We won't, because unlike you, we do not kill unnecessarily. But understand this, we have the capability. We have always had the capability. We simply chose not to use it." The Shadow Fleet began a demonstration. Ships moved through the Vraksh defensive grid with casual ease, their jamming systems rendering every targeting sensor useless. They flew patterns that showed they could strike any target they wished. They disabled 3 military satellites without destroying them, simply to prove the precision of their weapons. It was a display of overwhelming superiority designed to make one point absolutely clear: if humanity wanted to destroy the Vraksh, nothing could stop them. "You have 24 hours, Chen repeated. Surrender those responsible for the massacre, or we will come and take them. And we will dismantle every military asset you possess on our way to do it. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. The Shadow Fleet held position, waiting. On Vraksh Prime, chaos erupted. The government held emergency sessions. Corporate executives tried to flee the system. Citizens who had never thought about the humans they exploited suddenly realized those humans were capable of terrible things. The Galactic Council convened within hours. Species from across known space gathered to discuss this unprecedented situation. Some demanded immediate military action against Earth. Others urged caution, pointing out that humanity had committed no aggressive acts beyond demonstrating their capability. The debate raged for hours with no resolution. The Zephyrian ambassador, a being named Kale who had spent decades working with humans, finally spoke. His species had been among humanity's few genuine friends in the galaxy. "We have all profited from human labor while giving them nothing but contempt in return. We have allowed injustices to multiply because humans seemed powerless to stop them. Now we learn they were never powerless. They were patient. There is a difference. Perhaps instead of debating how to punish Earth for demanding justice, we should consider why it took a show of force for us to even acknowledge their grievances." His words hung in the air. No one had a response. The truth was too uncomfortable to address directly. On Vraksh Prime, the Supreme Chancellor made his decision. He could not risk his world for the sake of corporate executives who had grown rich through exploitation. The 5 Vraksh responsible for Platform 7 were arrested and prepared for transfer to Earth custody. Compensation agreements were drafted. The mighty Vraksh conglomerate, which had thought itself untouchable, bent to human demands because the alternative was destruction. The handover took place in neutral space. Vraksh transport ships delivered the prisoners to human custody. Thorex and his accomplices were shackled and placed in cells designed for beings of their size. They would face trial on Earth under human law. They would be forced to confront every family they had destroyed. They would learn what accountability meant. But the Shadow Fleet's mission was not finished. Over the following weeks, Chen's forces moved through the galaxy with surgical precision. They did not attack civilian targets. They did not occupy worlds or establish military bases. They simply went to every location where humans had been murdered or exploited, and they delivered justice. The Korathi Trade Consortium, responsible for the Zephyra incident a century ago, found their corporate headquarters surrounded by human warships. The executives who had ordered the colony destroyed were elderly now, some barely clinging to life. Earth did not care. They were arrested and transported to face trial. The consortium's assets were seized to pay restitution to the descendants of the 50,000 murdered colonists. Mining operations across 3 sectors that had been built on unpaid human labor were shut down until proper wages were paid. Station administrators who had covered up workplace deaths found human soldiers appearing at their doors with arrest warrants. Corporate entities that had profited from human suffering watched their stock values collapse as Earth's evidence of their crimes became public. The galaxy learned a simple lesson: human patience had limits. Human forgiveness had boundaries. And human justice, when finally delivered, was absolute. Elena Vasquez recovered slowly. Her leg would never be the same, but she could walk again. More difficult was recovering from what she had witnessed. She attended funerals for her crew, standing beside families who had lost everything. She testified at the trial of Thorex and his accomplices, describing in detail what they had done. She watched as they were sentenced to life imprisonment in a facility where they would spend every day contemplating their crimes. 6 months after the Platform 7 massacre, Elena received a message from Admiral Chen. He asked her to meet him at a military base in the mountains. When she arrived, she found something unexpected. The base was filled with former civilian workers like herself, people who had spent years in alien space, people who had survived injustices and returned home. "We're building something new," Chen explained as he walked with her through the facility. "The Shadow Fleet will continue its mission, but we need people who understand the civilian side of space. People who know what it's like to work among aliens, to navigate their cultures, to recognize when cooperation is possible and when strength is necessary. We need people like you." Elena looked around at the other former workers. She recognized some of them from various stations and platforms. They all had the same look in their eyes, the same mixture of grief and determination. They had all lost people. They had all suffered. And they were all ready to make sure it never happened again. "What exactly are you building?" she asked. "A new kind of human presence in space," Chen said. "Not workers who bow their heads and accept injustice. Not soldiers who rule through fear. Something in between. Humans who will trade and cooperate and build relationships, but humans who everyone knows can defend themselves if necessary. Humans who will never again smile while their people die." Elena thought about Jackson and Maria and Thomas and all the others who had died on Platform 7. She thought about the 200 years of patience that had gotten humanity nothing but contempt. She thought about the future and what it could become now that the galaxy knew humanity's true strength. "When do I start?" she asked. 1 year after the massacre, the Galactic Council held a special session. Earth had requested the opportunity to address the Assembly. Every species expected demands or ultimatums. Instead, Admiral Chen and Captain Elena Vasquez stood before them together. "Humanity bears no grudge against the galaxy," Chen said. "We understand that might makes right in your eyes. We understand that weakness invites exploitation. For 2 centuries, we appeared weak because we were building strength in secret. That phase of our history is over." Elena stepped forward. "We want to trade with you. We want to cooperate on scientific endeavors and cultural exchanges. We want to be part of the galactic community. But we will do so as equals. We will not accept second-class status. We will not allow our people to be abused. We will not smile while you treat us as disposable." She held up a data chip. "This contains a revised set of proposed treaties. Fair wages for human workers. Independent investigation of workplace incidents. Equal representation in trade disputes. We're not asking for special treatment. We're demanding the same rights you give each other." The council chamber was silent. Species looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Finally, Ambassador Kale of the Zephyrians spoke. "These terms seem reasonable. My government will sign." One by one, other species agreed. They had seen what happened to those who had exploited humanity. They had watched the Vraksh conglomerate collapse and the Korathi Trade Consortium disintegrate. They understood that the choice was simple: treat humans fairly or face consequences that could no longer be ignored. The treaties were signed within a month. Human workers returned to space, but under new conditions. They were protected by law and backed by strength. Station Kepler 9 reopened with human workers receiving fair wages and proper safety equipment. Mining operations resumed with proper oversight. The galaxy adjusted to a new reality where humans were partners rather than servants. Elena Vasquez returned to space as part of Earth's new diplomatic corps. She worked on stations and colonies, building relationships and solving problems. But everyone she encountered knew her story. They knew she had survived Platform 7. They knew what Earth had done in response. That knowledge changed every interaction. Aliens who might have once dismissed her now listened carefully to what she said. They understood that behind her polite smile was a species that would never again be pushed around. Admiral Chen retired from active command of the Shadow Fleet, though the fleet itself remained operational. Its existence was no longer secret. The galaxy knew humanity possessed overwhelming military force. They knew humans had the capability to wage devastating wars. But they also knew that humans preferred not to. As long as human rights were respected, as long as justice was available, humanity would continue to be reliable partners and friends. That was the new balance. Humanity would build and trade and cooperate. But they would do so from a position of strength rather than weakness. They would offer friendship backed by capability. They would seek peace while prepared for war. 200 years of patience had taught humanity many things. It taught them to understand alien cultures and navigate complex politics. It taught them to work hard and adapt to difficult conditions. It taught them to document crimes and wait for the right moment to act. Most importantly, it taught them that there was a time for smiling and a time for showing teeth. The galaxy had finally learned that lesson too. On the anniversary of the Platform 7 massacre, memorial services were held across human space. Elena attended the ceremony on Earth, standing with the families of her lost crew. 33 names were read aloud, 33 lives remembered and honored. They had not died for nothing. Their deaths had sparked the change that humanity needed. They would never be forgotten. As the service ended, Elena looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, on stations and platforms and colonies, humans were working alongside aliens. But they were working as equals now. They were protected. They were respected. And they were no longer afraid. The age of human patience was over. The age of human strength had begun. And the galaxy would never again mistake kindness for weakness.